Oh, Zaddy. Alright, listen, I don't want to waste anyone's time. The Snyder Cut is out. Spoiler alert, I liked it. So let's just go ahead and get right into it, eh? But first, let me establish my DC street cred. Over here, you can see the bottom section of my bookshelf. And over here, you can see me making a fool of myself in high school. So you can imagine that this movie is a pretty big deal to somebody like me. I'm gonna split this video into 3 parts. We're gonna have the pros, we're gonna have the cons, and then we're gonna have the spoiler section, which will also technically have its own pros and cons section, but like 3 main parts, okay? Stick around till the end if you want to hear thoughts and spoilers, because I can't really go into detail with everything in the spoiler-free section. So quick summary, Justice League takes place right after Batman v Superman. It starts literally with Superman getting fucking killed by Doomsday, and then after that, a bunch of aliens invade the Earth, led by Steppenwolf, and Batman has to assemble the Justice League to stop them. That's it, that's the summary, let's get into it. So the Snyder Cut is an unapologetic wankfest, and I actually mean that in a good way. I think it works for this story. See, the Justice League has been referred to very often as modern mythology. That's not something I made up. You can look it up. A lot of people have said this because it's true. They're like the modern 19th and 20th century equivalents of the Greek gods, except people don't actually believe in them. And I don't want to start a fight, but I do think that that applies much more to the Justice League than the Marvel equivalents, mostly due to the nature of the characters in each team. And a lot of Snyder's cliched director-isms end up suiting that tone. Zack Snyder's Justice League is grandiose and melodramatic in a way that feels appropriate to the stature of these characters. There are a lot of things that contribute to that. For starters, the cinematography really makes you feel like you've been dropped into a world where gods are descending into the realm of men. The music, yes, even the ancient lamentation singing, I actually feel like even though it was overused, it was very appropriate. It's so extra that it ends up working. The famous Zack Snyder slow-mo also helps, I think. It really helps you get into the moment and see how perceptive these superhuman, godlike beings actually are. They're operating on a plane that is literally beyond our understanding, and we can actually see that. Obviously, you put all that stuff together and you get some jaw-dropping action sequences, but none of this is a surprise. Like, this is the stuff that Snyder does well, and most of you probably already knew you'd be getting stuff like that before you went in. But genuinely, that feeling of like superhuman power is not something that I get from, I guess I gotta say it, I don't get it from the Marvel movies, okay? Like, they had an entire trilogy about a literal Norse god, and I never once got that feeling of like mythology come to life that this movie actually portrayed. And that's not even a knock against the movies. Like, I think Thor Ragnarok is a great movie, but not for that reason. So on a superficial level, this movie knocks it out of the park. But even beyond that, I feel like it treats the characters with so much more dignity and respect, especially in comparison with like the 2017 version. But this version, even standing on its own, genuinely does these characters justice. I'm sorry, I had to do it. Honestly, it's not even a comparison with the 2017 Justice League. Like, just take a look at Flash and Cyborg, who went from being like obnoxious or forgettable at best to literally like the best parts of the movie. Like, Cyborg's entire arc was completely cut from the theatrical edition, and Flash went from being this like actual pain in the ass to being genuinely funny and endearing. Most of the others we've seen before, and we all kind of knew what we were going to get, but they all stepped up. They all were fun to watch. They had great chemistry, and it made me sad to realize that we're probably never going to see this rendition of the team played by these actors bouncing off each other like this ever again. Steppenwolf makes a solid antagonist here. Like, he's a lot more menacing. He has a clear motivation this time, and he's kind of cute. Like, it's not just me, right? Like, he's adorable. I just want Widow Steven Wolf. I want to give you a Widow hug, Widow Steven. The man just wants to impress Darkseid Senpai and go home, and he's got to jump through all these hoops. You know, you got to feel bad for the guy a little bit. Now it's time for the cons. Like I said earlier, this is Zack Snyder at his wankiest, and while that does tend to work more often than not, which is why I like the movie, there are moments where it does not work. Like, if I see another Superman is Jesus metaphor, I swear to God, I'm just gonna laugh, actually, because I already laughed in this one when I saw it. In general, though, I'm not really a huge fan of Zack's take on Superman. Like, I'm totally fine with his Batman being like a sociopathic, paranoid, xenophobic mama's boy who goes around murdering thugs. Like, that's totally on brand in my opinion. But his Superman spends a little bit too much time like wondering if people are worth saving and that kind of stuff. It all feels a little Atlas shrugged, but that's a whole other can of worms that I don't want to get into here. Anyway, Zack also has this tendency of using like old songs that evoke a feeling of Americana, like the famous Hallelujah song from Watchmen and also the trailer of this movie. And it feels unnecessary at times, out of place, and often very dragged out for what's actually happening on the screen. It's just very self-indulgent. I'm not sure what it adds to the movie at all. And even though I like the general direction of the story, there are a few head scratcher moments. It's hard to talk about it without going into spoilers, so stay tuned for that one. And finally, the elephant of the room, 4 hours. Yeah, it's too long for its own good, but you have to take that with a grain of salt because this is basically a director's cut of a movie that we never got a theatrical edition for. It's like Lord of the Rings, for example. The theatrical edition of Lord of the Rings is like the better paced version. It's the more accessible version. It's the version in theaters because it has the mass appeal. And then the extended editions are like slower paced. They're not as like focused, but they have all this extra content that fans are just gonna eat up. And to me, this is like that version of Justice League, but we never actually got the theatrical version of it at all. So I'm not going to be too hard on it for being too long for its own good, but yes, there are moments where you're going to be like, this could have been shaved down a little bit. It was kind of inevitable, but I really wish we did get to see like the 3-hour cut of this movie because I feel like it would have been better, just straight up better. So overall, to cap off the spoiler-free section, I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I would, and I'm glad that we got to see this trilogy capped off. As a DC fan, it did feel like I was watching at least good versions of the characters I grew up with, and I appreciate that. It wasn't perfect, but nothing ever is. That's fine. Okay, spoilers now, alright? Spoilers. Run away if you don't want to hear spoilers. You have been warned. I gotta start with the cons because I feel like that's where I wasn't able to really express what I meant in the spoiler-free section. The scene with Wonder Woman in the courthouse feels very flimsy. Like, you're gonna tell me we have these terrorists who think that blowing up 4 blocks is gonna turn humanity back to the Dark Ages? Like, okay, it's a stretch, but they're terrorists. They're not rational. Fine. Then you're gonna tell me that they have a freaking timer on their bomb instead of just suicide bombing without a heads up, like, I don't know, real life suicide bombers? But then you're gonna say, well, they're terrorists. They want to be the center of attention. They want everyone to see them in the spotlight. All right, fine. And then you're gonna tell me Wonder Woman shows up, kicks all their asses, by the way, amazing fight scene. And then you're gonna tell me instead of like knocking out Bruce Bolton, Wonder Woman does her fucking clangy move and blows out half the wall and drops all this rubble on all the civilians? Like, why? We just established in excruciating detail that she's fast enough to knock these people out without any issues. Okay, the Martian Manhunter reveal. This scene legitimately pissed me off. Like, I'm fine with the ending scene because MM laying low on Earth and not really wanting to involve until he felt like, you know what, he actually has a stake on this planet. That makes sense to me. That feels in character. But this scene with him like impersonating Ma Kent is so weird and creepy. First of all, it completely invalidates a genuinely touching scene between Ma Kent and Lois, where it felt like she was being a mother to someone who was struggling to grieve. That was Ma Kent's biggest contribution to this movie, and it just got ripped away from her by this reveal. Second of all, think about how it makes MM look. Like, he's out here doing research on Ma Kent and like figuring out her financial situation and all this. It's just so weird, such a weird way to introduce him. It makes him look like a weirdo and it undermines Ma Kent. Not a fan of that scene, just not a fan. Also, the anti-life equation thing. I am confused because during the Lord of the Rings flashback sequence when Darkseid showed up and got his ass kicked, he like smashed the ground and we saw the Omega sign and it was like, oh look, that's the anti-life shit. And then later on, Steppenwolf does the same basic thing and sees the same thing. And he's like, oh my God, it's anti-life, it's anti-life. And everyone on Apocalypse is like shook. Like, shouldn't you guys already know that? Didn't you guys see that the last time? This is the one planet where you got your ass kicked and you forgot all of these important details? I'm confused. But hey, let's wrap it up on a good note. There were some badass scenes in this movie, some chills inducing scenes, all right? Like Cyborg's scene where he learns about his powers, the visual storytelling in that scene, and the way that he helps that single mom. It's just so heartwarming. It's so nice. And the way it all ties in at the end when he says, I'm not broken. I love that. I love that. I love Cyborg in this movie. And then Flash running back in time was absolutely jaw-dropping. I'm sorry, Quicksilver. I'm sorry, other Quicksilver. I'm sorry, Grant Gustin Flash. This is just the best speedster we've seen yet. I'm sorry. All the scenes with the Amazons were so badass. Like that whole chase sequence at the beginning. Oh, it's so cool. Like, it genuinely does feel like these characters that I love have come to life here. All that being said, though, I will be happy to see another director's take on the Justice League. I'm glad all the hardcore Snyder fans got what they wanted to see, but the Justice League deserves universal appeal, iconic status, and I don't think that's going to happen with Snyder at the helm. I'm sorry. Anyways, I know it's not the deepest analysis you've ever seen, but if you enjoyed it, drop all the likes and all that. Stick around if you want to see more random analysis of random stuff. See you next time.